these two books are truly remarkable. One is called Emergency Verse, Poetry in Defence of the Welfare State, and the other is called the Robin Hood book, Verse versus Austerity. And they are both the brainchilds of one man, Alan Morrison. Alan Morrison is a well-known poet. He edits an online poetry magazine called The Recusant, which has, at last count, I believe, something like 157,000 regular viewers. And it was a remarkable chance that one day in 2010, the poet Brenda Williams, who was then doing a protest in Camden against cuts to the NHS, happened to write a poem, a protest poem, a poem that grew out of her own immediate protest. And I just happened to send it to Alan Morrison. This is not something I would normally do. I don't know why I did it. And there was no knowledge in me, and in fact there had been no announcement by Alan Morrison that he was about to launch his idea of producing emergency verse. And both collections are very remarkable. It's very sad that the mainstream press paid them no attention. The first one was mentioned in The Guardian, and Brenda Williams and I were the only named poets mentioned in that review, or mini-review, and they are very interesting, and it was a very difficult job that Alan had to do. He must have put hundreds, no, thousands of hours of unpaid work into the compilation, the selection. He oversaw the production, and they were produced by his own press, Comparison, in association with his magazine, The Recusant. It is very difficult to write poetry to order. I couldn't do it. And I think the great strength, and this is why to me Brenda Williams' poems stand out in both collections as being the best, is because they were not written to order for these books. They were written out of the direct experience, the lived experience of on-the-ground protest. I'm not talking about the things that you and I may often do, join a 2-hour march against the closure of an A&E department or write to the newspapers, but this was coal-face protesting. Winter, spring, summer, autumn, not days, not weeks, but months spread over a number of years, which was mainly in Hampstead Green, a small lane which was not owned by Camden Council, but which Camden Council, under all three parties I believe, strongly objected to and had ripped down 3 times in spite of the right to protest enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which we're supposed to subscribe to. This was completely disgraceful, and I appealed this to the Planning Inspectorate, and she was given permission for a measly 12 placards. The whole thing reflects extremely badly on Camden Council, and I will never ever personally forgive them. The point about Brenda's poems is that they are out of that protest, or those protests, and this is why, to me, they soar above in the firmament of the poetry in these two books. And I'm eternally grateful for Alan Morrison for having seen their quality and put them in these books. The first one is called Gin Lane, To Whom It May Concern, and it's a poem about a particularly nasty piece of work who wandered down the lane, ripping the placards down. What his motive was, nobody knows, and no one ever will know. But I think the poem is absolutely fantastic. As you walked down through Hampstead Green, you left a scene behind that brought to mind Hogarth's Gin Lane. You, with your tanked up swaggering and your shored up bottom of the bottle gait, sure and polar blue as the skies, your gaze. Did your eyes read them before you ripped them down? Gertrude, in memoriam, how far did she get to you? As near as you would get to her, near enough to rip her from the railings, leaving the fastenings, the placards strewn underfoot in the lane, and a sheer and distant apprehension that would never, ever leave me again. We thought you were catastrophically drunk, so high you were veering on the edge of the sky, threatening to emblazon the green with the football regalia and insignia of your team, asking all the while, insisting on an answer, and that the God-given right to protest was a personal affront to himself and to the ordinary decency of the honest working man in the street, or anyone left in the lane to meet, where poetry and free speech were in vain, where Gertrude would never be seen again. Within moments of entering the lane, you walked away from your own inferno, and the only thing I could remember after were your eyes of Aryan blue, empty and impenetrable before me, and yet faint and unseeing, locked fast against an evening's lowering May light, recoiling suddenly away from you, as though sucked in then and there in a tsunami's waiting, receding tide. So young, your words were quaintly old-fashioned. The placards in the lane a carbuncle, and an affront to the environment, to all who live to work. His argument this side of time for the unwarranted and intrusive tampering with the dead. There is a price on the head of those who fall most foul that is uncollectible for your clicking little Nazi-licking life, the unredeemable sacrifice of your soul, whether you end or begin, a primal clockwork man, tanked up on gin. This side of life, in the din, the nearest I ever got to a Nazi was him, bandy-legged with a cock-of-the-walk stride of the recalcitrant habitual criminal, as you turn about and square up to God or man or anything else, on either side as you pass on your way, furtive, uneasy, in the dark of May. The very cauldron of a volcano, mouthed in hell, atomic in night shadow, a use of language nothing can assuage, to work, to live, the mantra of an age. After so long, I can no more renege on the protest than I can walk away from poetry or the torn and worn strands in the weft and woof of the bewildered heart, and accustomed groan to the long-drawn burden of loss that is both piecemeal and gratuitous, and always beyond its own reach or horizon. There is only the spirit's proof to pit against language and industrial death on history's page. And in the second volume, the Robin Hood book, Brian's not there. The Brian referred to, of course, is the late Brian Hall, the only person I've met personally who should have got the Nobel Peace Prize. He was given Channel 4 Person of the Year award, and his work was celebrated by the internationally famous artist Mark Wallinger in a permanent touring exhibition, a perfect replica of Brian's magnificent protest, which, like Brenda's, was torn down by the police. And this was one of the great blots, I think, on English history, is that this protest in Parliament Square was attacked, and Brian himself died of cancer, which was very sad indeed. I met him only on a few occasions, and he was the man you met is the true spirit of Christianity and socialism and humanity. His protest lasted for years, night and day, with a very few followers, and sometimes the followers changed as years passed. He alone was constant until his death. And he offered Brenda his protection. She was the only person that I know, apart from his immediate followers, that he was prepared to share his pitch. And he said to Brenda that if he wasn't protesting against the death of children in the wars the West had been engaged in, he would too have been protesting cuts to the NHS. And this is a tribute called Brian's Not There. Brian is not there in Parliament Square, and the appeal will be heard without him. The air is heavy with official spring, and the hours toll, summoning as though for a roll call suddenly for tomorrow. Here there is no shelter from the low-strung sun, no refuge from winter at its height. What kept him going was a conviction that he had to do what was right, putting his body on the last front line, standing in the light and without any room for the default mode, with no resolution, soon the watermark of a life to be and an acquaintance with posterity. The hell of it all would seep through his mind, and the dark as he dared to dream, all was the hours, the days before him, with only his own forlorn shadow to lean upon. A moth spiralling, he would navigate the night, an involuntary flight path to a deliberate last tomorrow. And the end was not about why or what, but how long he had been doing it for. The longer the time, the greater would be its curtailment, the legal argument a mantra about how much grass a sick man needs to lay on, relegated there to the cold pavement of Parliament Square. If he's lucky enough to be left there for even a night before Westminster Council sweeps down from the endless might of its municipal height, London, that you should come to this. There is nowhere to go with my sorrow, or the echo of my country, the distant sound of a countdown to a history of our own making, a police state which he tried and defied, and a protest that would not be denied. And through it all the bells had the last call, urging him to turn as Whittington once, in its momentary vicinity, the years. Brian is not there any more. A woman now stands alone in his stead, resisting the proof that protest is dead, killed for a coach and a day in its thrall, vanishing at midnight, invisible the heat, the cold, the pity of it all. But the coach was only the latest blow. The state had murdered protest years ago. Brian was putting his life on the line, standing for freedom in your life and mine. What he reaped were the slings and arrows and the lob from the passing yob, whose proverb was "get a job," even when he had one. His occupation was to speak for us there, the downtrodden and those in despair, with nowhere to go but Parliament Square. And most of us never knew he was there, reviled in his lifetime and his protest defiled. He spoke for a decade for the tiniest child. He was classified by the state as a terrorist, not a man. He was a pacifist. He is Brian, and his job is about to be taken away for no reason but being there for too many years in the square. He never gave you cause, not for a single moment in your 10-year war against him. Beware, you too reap at your peril there, to the barriers in Parliament Square. It is a war cry and a rallying cry for the downtrodden, for the defeated, for the poor, for the vulnerable, and it is a terrible comment on our age that we're looking now at 1 year, perhaps 2, since Brian died, yet there is no sign of anyone writing a biography of him, In fact, nobody really gets biographies written about them anymore. Apparently there is no money left for biographies. But if anyone ever deserved a biography, it is Brian Hoare. The only monument to his memory is a possibility of a small statue in Parliament Square, which I doubt will ever be built, the permanently touring exhibition by Mark Wallinger, and Brenda Williams' magnificent poem, which I've just read.